Hello, welcome back. That's a weird thing to say. Anyway, welcome to yet another comparative religions PowerPoint lecture, which I make occasionally for my Anglo-American University students here in Prague, Czech Republic. But if you're not one of my AAU students, then you don't need to worry about homework, but you're welcome to travel along with us. But for you AAU students, I expect you to have a response question posted on the My Learning forum at least 24 hours before the class starts. Before we get into the slides themselves, a note about the current situation with Chinese traditional religions. The estimates of how many Chinese traditional religionists there are in the world at the moment varies wildly, from just over 400 million to somewhere around 470 million. Generally, estimates are between 400 and 430, but nobody really knows. And that's because most of the people who follow Chinese traditional religions live in China, in mainland China. Also, a good number live in Vietnam and Taiwan, but most of them live on mainland China, and they just don't track this stuff very well. And even if they did, it's really hard to see who actually counts as a Chinese traditional religionist. According to a Pew Research report in 2023 that talked about the difficulties of measuring religion in China, they mentioned something called the Chinese General Social Survey that happened in 2018, where they asked people about different social attitudes and behaviors, and they found that 33% of the Chinese population in 2018 said they believed in Buddha and or a bodhisattva or bodhisattvas. And 26% of them actually burned incense to deities, and I would assume that would include ancestor spirits as well. And the number that said that they actually belong to a religion, 10%. Right? So that's like 23% of people who believe in something but don't want to be known as believing in it. So it's kind of dicey. Anyway, according to your textbook for my AAU students, Understanding World Religions by Irving Hexham, Hexham says, oh, it's a dead religion. Nobody actually believes this stuff anymore. It's been killed off by the communists. The CCP, the Chinese Communist Party, is officially atheist. It's been killed off by the communists, by the forces of modernity, by the forces of feminism. Nobody does Chinese traditional religions anymore. I don't think he's correct in that. I think there's evidence to the contrary. And even if it was that it was completely dead in China, which it's not, there are still a lot of these ideas that circulate around in the West in the form of New Age practices and beliefs. So it's worth paying attention to. Okay? Even if you want to know actually what's going on in the West, Chinese traditional religion matters. So, Chinese traditional religion arose sometime around the Shang dynasty, which lasts from 1766 to 1122 BC. The welfare of the empire was thought to depend upon the piety, the religiousness, the religious goodness of the people, and especially the emperor. So, for example, the Zhou dynasty, when they came into power, They believed that they had been given the throne by heaven because the Shang dynasty had become corrupt and had stopped obeying God. Therefore, when political stability broke down later in China during what is known as the Warring States period, that's 475 to 221 BC, people looked for a specifically religious solution. Because there had been this long tradition between the identity of the state and religion. And perhaps it was this long tradition of connection between the religion of the state is why the Chinese government feels threatened by religious dissenters, such as the Falun Gong sect. For those of you who don't know what Falun Gong is, it's basically a set of meditative practices that involve slow movement exercise techniques, sort of like Tai Chi. And the government started persecuting some of them, and in protest, 10,000 of them showed up for a mass meditation outside the appeals building outside the Zhongnanhai leadership compound in Beijing in 1999, and the government went ballistic and they started, kidnapping people, disappearing them, summary executions, the whole 9 yards. It also, this connection between, or this perceived long historical connection between the state leadership and religion also could help explain why the Chinese state is so intent on persecuting Tibetan Buddhists who, or wanting to control Tibetan Buddhism and the succession to the new Dalai Lama when that happens. We'll have more to say about that. Actually, we did have something to say about that in Vajrayana. Anyway, or why it's so intent on persecuting Chinese underground churches. In China, the only legal Christian church you can belong to is what is known as the Three Self Church, which is a highly compromised version of Christianity, which looks very little like either Catholicism or Protestant Christianity, but is more like Christianity remade to please the Chinese government, essentially. The Chinese government sees any expression, any religious expression that it does not sign on to and somehow control as a challenge to its authority. And after all, the CCP is officially atheist. All right. Where do we get yin and yang from? Well, an early creation myth of Chinese religion had to do with this guy, Pan Ku, who is a cosmic man who arose out of the chaos, which had the form of an egg. And the egg settled into two contrasting energies, a lighter and a heavier part. And the lighter part was called yang, and the heavier, darker part was called yin. And when these two are in balance, the universe, the cosmos, is in harmony. I'm afraid to tell you that the cute cat poster with the cats hugging in the upper right-hand corner of the slide is wrong. It ought to have the opposite labels. Yang is the bright cat and yin is the dark cat, which means, dear students, take care. The information sometimes passes on the internet passes on misinformation, even sometimes about cat pictures. Hard to believe, but true. Anyway, yang is associated with the active, the hot, life, summer, male, day, odd numbers, sun, fire, whereas yin is associated with passive, cold, death, winter, female, night, even numbers, moon, and water. One is not necessarily good and the other evil, but kind spirits are pure yang, while demons, that is evil spirits, who are generally spirits of people who died suddenly away from home, very much like African traditional religions, or died by drowning, where they couldn't be buried, or by hanging, and who can be dangerous and to be feared. These come from pure yin. Yin and yang are also a way of explaining the order of the world and why things change. Things change because yin and yang are out of balance. It also supports certain social values, like, for example, why men are superior to women. Why? Because men are direct and active and bright, and they get to it and they do it, whereas women are cool and dark and mysterious, and they just can't be trusted. They're going to mislead you and seduce you into bad things. Yin and yang also provide a way of telling the future. When yin and yang are out of balance, it leaves marks on the natural order, and by tossing yarrow sticks or coins, these patterns of imbalance are visible to someone who is trained in how to read these patterns. These patterns and how to interpret them are the subject of the I Ching, which is basically a fortune-telling book, a way of telling the future. It's a bunch of graphs called hexagrams, which tell you what's going to happen and how to interpret future events according to how the sticks fall or the coins fall. And here is an example of a page. Oh, so let me explain these guys. So pure yang, these three unbroken lines, three unbroken yarrow sticks, where they're not crossing, represents the sky. Pure yin, where you have three crossing sticks or three broken lines, represents the earth, pure yin. And then you have combinations of these, of course. If you've got one, if you've got less yang, which is two unbroken with one, that's fire, sun, lightning, or less yin, rain, streams, moon, and so forth. And then you pair them up into, so you've got lines of threes, you pair them up, that's called a hexagram, and each of them has a certain meaning. Where do I meet the enemy in battle? And if you get Zhen, which is two broken and one unbroken trigram, then, which is a lesser yin, then you will meet them east, or by a river, blah 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 blah. It can get quite complex, as you can see. All right, let's talk about Shangdi, the god of heaven. A supreme deity named Shangti was worshipped during the Shang dynasty, which is different from Shangti. It's the same word, Shang, but it's a different Chinese word behind the, it has to do with the limits of English transliteration from China into English. He was not well defined, but he lived in heaven, and his will could be found out through divination, through reading signs like the hexagrams and the I Ching. And that would make Shangti what? It would make him I can't hear you because I'm recording, but if you said sky god, you're correct. The sky god was not worshipped by common people, but only by the emperor, who is sometimes called the son of heaven, Tianzi, because and Shangti was sometimes called Tian. It was his job to worship Tian for the people, which he did by presenting a sacrifice during the winter solstice. And apologies to anybody who actually knows Chinese out there for my pronunciation. So there are also many local dark spirits, both good and bad. They were believed to inhabit dark, inaccessible, and lonely places. And demons were associated with yin, were associated with tigers, snakes, and the dark. Whereas good spirits are associated with the phoenix, the turtle, dragon, fire, and light. And that's why there are so many firecrackers that they celebrate the new year with firecrackers, because the firecrackers give off light and noise, a brilliant burst of light that scares away evil spirits. Years and years ago, when we still lived in the States, friends of ours and we were out at a Chinese restaurant, a local Chinese restaurant, and we were just having dinner, and all of a sudden these firecrackers start going off outside the restaurant, and then swooping into the restaurant came this big, like, dragon puppet costume thing, like you see in the pictures here. And it was snapping its jaws open and shut, and something was coming out of its mouth. That something was like lettuce, and a wet piece of lettuce like landed right on my glasses, and I was like, "Hey!" And when the waiter came up, I said, "Hey, the dragon hit me with a piece of lettuce." And he said, "Oh, such good luck, sir, such good luck." And I was like, and all of a sudden I was like, "Oh, cool. Look at me, I'm privileged. I got hit in the glasses with a piece of lettuce." But that's, it's part of the whole thing. It's part of that religious heritage. Now, let's talk about the Tao. The Tao means the way, as in the way of a river, a course of a river, or a road. And it carries a normative aspect, the way you should go. It's like the law, the way things should go in the world. So it's very, very similar to the Indian concept of dharma. In later Chinese thought, Tao was thought to be a single force that controls all relationship of things and integrates them harmoniously into one harmonious whole. It's a kind of pantheism, and if you don't know what pantheism is, Brahman is a pantheistic concept, that the divine spirit is everywhere, connecting everything, in everything, is everything. And we're going to look at this in more depth when we get to Taoism. It was a matter of speculation how best you harmonize with the Tao. Do you do it by laying down strict rules in order to order society, or do you do it by letting things go their own way, kind of a Hakuna Matata, chill sort of thing? And that was to be a chief debate among Chinese traditional religions, as we shall soon see. Another aspect of Chinese traditional religion is ancestor worship. An early Chinese writing places the ancestors of the Zhou dynasty as dwelling on high and having a special relationship with Qian, the high god, the sky god. That meant that not only was there a life after death, death is not the end, but only a translation or a transition to a more honorable state of existence, but that the dead had a powerful influence on the world of the living. They blessed those who pleased them, and they punished those with whom they were displeased. And this is not a family picture. These are ancestors that an artist has drawn as like still living people, part of the family. And that means that family ties go beyond the grave. One should consult with the ancestors before making any big decision that would affect a family, like this young couple who's about to be married are doing. Whether it's marriage or buying land or trying to get into university or choosing a career or a big business decision, you consult the ancestors. So rituals for the family were performed by the eldest male in the household, which made an official priesthood for Chinese traditional religions unnecessary. In modern China, for Chinese traditional religionists, when a family member dies, not only do you have a funeral procession, but you make a paper house like the picture on the right, maybe a paper car, maybe paper money. When we come in for the Q&A, I will bring in some paper objects that I bought in San Francisco's Chinatown. And there's hell money, which means money for the dead. And by burning these, you provide for the dead person. Burning a paper house means you give them a house in the afterlife. I think there are even paper mobile phones and stuff. You still do have to give them food and wine and flowers for 3 generations from the oldest living member of the family. Each year, usually in August, the Chinese, at least outside of mainland China, have what is known as the Hungry Ghost Festival, so that the ancestors who don't have family to take care of them properly will feel cared for and won't cause harm to the living. They won't turn into demons. So people erect roadside shrines and burn paper money in houses and stuff for the dead and do special rituals. There are also dramas that are held. They don't have to be religious in nature. Rather, they are put on to provide entertainment for the uncared for dead. And if you look at this big thing with all these squares of paper floating around, each one of them has like fake gold foil attached to it, and it's part of the festival. I'll bring a couple in that I found in Taiwan when I was there. And that, my friends, is the video lesson for the day. So write down your questions, and we will talk when we get to class. Okay? Have a wonderful rest of your day. See ya. Bye-bye.